But we begin with Enbridge's Line 5 pipeline. Michigan has given the company until next Wednesday to shut it down, arguing it is a ticking time bomb. Now, Line 5 runs underwater between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, carries 540,000 barrels of oil and gas per day. Ontario and Quebec get more than half their crude supply from that pipeline. So what happens if it's shut down? Well, here are three potential impacts. First of all, there's jobs. They could be lost. Ontario has said 5,000 direct jobs are at risk, as well as more than 23,000 indirect ones. Shutting down the pipeline would also create a fuel and propane shortage. Gas prices could really skyrocket, and so could the cost of heating your home. Finally, there is the impact on Canada's busiest airport, Toronto's Pearson International. It gets all of its jet fuel from that Line 5. Cutting that off could mean suspended operations and major disruptions to supply chains. Enbridge and Michigan have been in court-ordered mediation since mid-April, and in the meantime, what is this federal government doing to prevent Line 5 from seeing the same fate as Keystone XL? Well, Kirsten Hillman is Canada's ambassador to the U.S., and she joins us from Washington. Ambassador Hillman, thank you very much for joining the program. And I want to just start off by being very blunt. Is Michigan's order a threat to Canada's national or economic security?
Hi, David. Thanks for having me. No, it is not a threat to Canada's national, economic, or energy security. I think that it is an important dispute or disagreement that exists between Enbridge and the state of Michigan that needs to be taken very seriously, and we are taking it very seriously, as is the company, as is Michigan. But it is an issue that is subject right now to a lot of discussions. It's subject to mediation between the two parties, and we are really putting our energy there on making sure people understand the importance of this pipeline, understand that it is operated safely for over 65 years, and doing everything we can as a federal government to support and encourage a resolution between Enbridge and Michigan.
And what does that involve? Because we aren't quite at the 11th hour, but next Wednesday is getting very, very close. That order is supposed to take effect then. You note that they're in mediation, but Michigan does not seem to be budging. It seems very intent that Enbridge should shut that Line 5 down by next Wednesday.
Right. No, and we're aware of what the governor's office has said in that regard. But I guess I would just point back to the mediation. The mediation is ongoing. The parties are meeting regularly. They're meeting into the month of May. And the company's view is that while the mediation and the court processes are ongoing, the line will continue to operate as they work constructively together to find a solution.
So that's the position of the company, but Michigan has quite a bit of support as well for its position. 16 attorneys general, admittedly all from Democratic states, as Michigan is in this case with a Democratic governor. But there is quite a bit of support for what Michigan is doing, and doing that support in the legal realm, in court. What is the Canadian government doing to try to lobby to affect an outcome that is desirable to Canada?
Right. So there's a lot of different discussions going on by the government of Canada. This is an issue that was raised in a discussion between the Prime Minister and the President back in February. We have had engagement with the highest and most senior levels of the White House, over 10 individual meetings. We have had, as recently as yesterday, Foreign Minister Garneau met with the Secretary of State Blinken and discussed Line 5. And in those discussions, as I say, we're talking about the important economic and energy security implicated in this pipeline and the need for us as federal governments to do what we can to support the continued safe operation of the pipeline while a solution can be reached between Michigan and Enbridge.
And we spoke to the governor's office in the state of Michigan. They sent us a statement, and they said in part that these oil pipelines in the Strait of Mackinac are a ticking time bomb, that's their words, and their continued presence violates the public trust and poses a grave threat to Michigan's environment and economy. She goes on to say the notice gave Enbridge 180 days to arrange for a shutdown and subsequent decommissioning of the pipelines. That 180-day period expires on May 12th. As of that date, Enbridge's continued operation of the Line 5 pipelines in the Straits of Mackinac would be unlawful. If indeed the governor does revoke this permit, as she has said repeatedly she intends to do over many months now, will that line indeed be operating against the law?
Yeah, well, David, those are questions I think for the Michigan courts to decide. I'm not qualified to really give a decision on that. I do think that obviously the governor has expressed her views very clearly. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, the company has expressed its views that not only has the pipeline been operating safely for over 65 years, there have been two assessments of the pipeline by the U.S. federal authorities in 2020 and 2021, where it was found to be operating safely. So clearly, the two parties have different perspectives that need to be reconciled in order for a solution to be met here. And that's in part why, of course, they're in court and in mediation. And we're putting a lot of emphasis on that, because that's the only way that we're going to find ourselves, for those two parties to come together and bridge their differences is the only way for this problem to be solved.
I'm not left with the sense, Ambassador, that sort of the alarm bells are ringing in your mind, even though the deadline appears to be next Wednesday, and this line provides all of the fuel for the largest airport in the country and half of the fuel for Ontario and Quebec. Is there not a worry that somehow Michigan will carry out its threat and demand that this be shut down on the date that they have repeatedly said it should be shut down?
Well, I think it's important to say that there is no question that this is a very important issue between Canada, the United States, between Michigan and Canada, between Enbridge and Michigan. This is a very important issue. So I don't mean in any way to underemphasize that point. What I'm trying to emphasize is the degree to which we have been very actively engaged, the federal government, in doing what we can, which is to engage the Biden administration and all of their most senior decision makers that would potentially have any influence on Michigan and this issue. And we are very, very active in that. And we have brought a lot of facts to bear on that. And beyond that, I think that it's just very difficult for me to speculate as to what is going to happen on the 12th. But we understand from the advice that we have received that there is, there's a good chance that the pipeline, that the company believes the pipeline will continue operating during the course of the litigation and mediation.
Ambassador, your video's frozen up on us just for a second here, but I did want to ask you about the border. We see the top Democrat in Congress, Chuck Schumer, saying that he thinks the border, the northern border, should be open to non-essential travelers as quickly as possible. Where do talks stand on that reopening?
So we talk about the border with DHS and the White House every couple of weeks. We share information on the profile of COVID in our two countries. Right now, obviously, Canada is in the grips of a third wave and facing a lot of challenges in that regard. And there are many parts in the United States that are facing the same situation. So we are going to continue to be, guided by the facts on the ground and our ability to be controlling the virus on the ground. So we'll talk about reopening the border when and easing those restrictions when those facts warranted. And right now, unfortunately, we're just not at that spot. So
we do have, some degree of modeling and projection about where things are likely to head. And I've only got a couple of seconds here left, but should Canadians forget about that border being open before, say, July?
Again, if there's one thing I've learned over this last year is that this virus and the way it behaves, unfortunately, is not something it's easy for us to predict. I think we should be feeling optimistic as more Canadians get vaccinated, as more Americans get vaccinated. But we have to remember, even down here, there's still over 50, I think it's about 55% of the U.S. population is still unvaccinated, right? So there is still a lot of work to be done on both sides of the border. Progress is being made. We're really happy about that. But we're going to have to just keep assessing based on the facts on the ground.
Ambassador Hillman, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Mike Fernandez is a senior vice president at Enbridge. He's in Calgary and joins us now. Mr. Fernandez, thank you very much for joining the program. I just want to start on a very practical level. There is this deadline. It's on Wednesday. What could Michigan actually do? Is there a big tap they can turn and shut things off on one end of the Straits of Mackinac?
I think that's highly unlikely. I think the deadline's more likely to prompt protesters than state action. And the reason I say that is because the matter right now is situated in a U.S. federal district court that has prompted both parties, that is the state and Enbridge, to work through a mediator. That mediator was selected, former U.S. District Court Judge Gerald Rosen, and both parties have met with Judge Rosen and with each other. And we have dates scheduled beyond the 12th. It would seem if the state took action, that they would be acting outside the standard of good faith that's normally required in such mediation. It also would be in defiance of federal and international law, which is primarily our case.
You know, I want to ask you about the sense of urgency on this, because we had Ambassador Hillman, the ambassador of Canada to the United States, on the program earlier, and I asked her if she believed Canada's national or economic security was threatened by Michigan's actions, by Michigan's potential order. She said no. Do you feel that the federal government understands the urgency at play here?
Well, the reality is, as you set out in the preamble here, is the amount of energy that both Quebec and Ontario depend on is significant. And what I would hate to see is that at the end of a pandemic is what we generate is an energy crisis.
Are you getting the support from the Canadian government that you expect?
Yes, they've been very vocal with the Biden administration. We're hopeful that they'll continue to apply the pressure. We also have had great support from provincial governments. And the challenge here is that, right now, people may be getting comfortable because it's getting warmer outside. But when you start to think about the fact that a major source, an energy lifeline, if you will, for surrounding states as well as Canada's two largest provinces are actually weighing in the balance here.
Mr. Fernandez, I want to ask you, because the governor of Michigan has called this a ticking time bomb, Line 5. It's 68 years old. It runs under at the very bottom of this strait in between two of the Great Lakes. If there were a rupture, it would cause significant environmental damage, according to the governor of Michigan. There have been anchor strikes by boats. They've bent the pipe. They've never actually caused it to rupture. But she calls it a ticking time bomb because she believes inevitably there will be something that will cause this. How do we get to this point that there's a 68-year-old pipeline? There have been talks about something to replace it, a tunnel underneath, and yet here we are, seemingly at the 11th hour, where there are significant environmental concerns and there is not yet a solution.
Two things. One, I want to correct the context, and then two, also understand that what we're listening to is political hyperbole. In terms of context, the pipe itself has never been harmed. What we have seen is some problems with the coating on the pipe, and what we have seen is we've seen these anchor screws that have sort of unset themselves, and then we've got to go back in and either reset them or replace them. But the pipe itself is strong. The pipe itself has never dropped an ounce of oil into the water, and like all likelihood won't. And in fact, the people that know—
Mr. Fernandez, Michigan would argue they don't ever want to get to the point where that does happen. They're looking at a 7-decade-old pipeline. It's not going to happen, you're saying.
So the state of Michigan does not have authority or the complete understanding around pipeline safety. The authority actually rests with the federal government. So there's a separate administration called PHMSA, and PHMSA back just this last fall did a full assessment of Line 5 and said it was safe and said it was fit for service.
So we heard the same kind of safety assessment for the pipeline that ran through Kalamazoo 11 years ago and caused one of the worst spills in U.S. history, and that was also an Enbridge pipeline.
So I would say that what happened in Kalamazoo ultimately changed the nature of what happens in Enbridge. When I joined as an Enbridge employee, I was given a ring, and that ring was from the metal from that pipeline. And it's as a reminder that safety is job one at Enbridge, and our efforts on safety have been extraordinary since, and we're taking extraordinary measures and have spent millions of dollars to make sure there is no accident at the Straits of Mackinac.
How can you reassure the people of Michigan that a 7-decade-old pipeline will continue not to have problems just because it hasn't to this point?
So again, it has not had problems. Two, it is a very thick pipe. It was state-of-the-art when it was built. It is pretty much state-of-the-art today. We do have a solution. That solution, we agreed with the previous administration in Michigan. It was overwhelmingly supported by the state legislature in Michigan, and that's to build a tunnel that would go well below the lake bed. So there would be no interaction with water, no threat of anchor strikes. All we need to do is get to that point of actually building that tunnel. And that in part
why has that not happened?
Controlled by the state of Michigan in providing permits for that.
Is that the only holdup? Is that the only reason that has yet to happen? Because it's been on the books for years.
What has been on the books?
The idea of tunneling has been...
Well, the tunnel was approved literally the year before Governor Whitmer went into office.
And based on that, you feel that there essentially has not been any movement on it since that time.
Well, no, that's not true either. What has happened is we've actually gone for permits and actually received permits from the state of Michigan, at least the first set of permits that we needed. So we continue to look at building that tunnel if the governor will let us get to that.
Let me go back to what the Canadian government has indicated to you. This is in a court process. Have they indicated to you whether they'll join you as an intervener?
What I do know is that they are likely to weigh in and make their opinion known both to the court and the general public.
Okay. Let me ask you then about the 1977 treaty that Canada has with the United States, in which Canada essentially could invoke that treaty, and this is a treaty that has to deals with the transmission of pipeline material or material through pipelines to ensure that it's unhindered. Yeah. That has not been invoked by the Canadian government. Do you believe it should be?
I do, and in large part because it was created after the Arab oil embargo to make sure that energy security for both countries is taken care of and managed well. It's interesting in that it was signed by a previous Prime Minister Trudeau, as well as a first-term Democratic president.
Let me ask you, Mike, because I've only got 30 seconds left here. You think it should be invoked. Why hasn't it?
Well, I think, what happens in these situations is people see that there is court activity and want to back off and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And I think, if the state overplays its hand on May 12th, that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back.
All right, Mike Fernandez.
But the reason I'm so upbeat about the treaty too is it had to be approved by the United States Senate, and there was a freshman member of the U.S. Senate then from the state of Delaware by the name of Biden.
We'll have to leave it there. Mike Fernandez, Enbridge Senior Vice President, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.